Alright, so this is where we ended the previous video, and I want to start with our base scene again. So under levels, I will open our level 01 studio, save everything if it asks. And now I want to go to File, Save Current Level As, and save this one as level 03 underscore heatsink. Select the GPU group, and then let's reset the rotation so it's just laying flat, and I will rotate it 90 degrees. If it's not snapping, then just enable the rotation snapping here. So it goes every 10 degrees, rotated 90. And I want to select this heatsink object here. And I want to hit W to move, then hold Alt and drag it up to make a copy of just the heatsink. And I want to detach it from the group. So I'll just drag it on top of the GPU, and that will actually snap it out of it. So it's separate object, and I can just hide the GPU group. So now I have this heatsink object on its own, but what I want is just one individual plate. So I need to somehow split this object into its individual elements. And for that, we can go to the modeling mode, click on Xform, and then split. And by default, this will split it by mesh topology, which in this case works perfectly. Each little heatsink plate is a different color, which means that it's going to be a different object. So I'll just say accept, and it's going to split it into all of these objects, but I only want one. So I'll just select the front one and move it away from the others. And then I can select all the remaining ones and just delete them. Now, in order for the cloner to reveal this properly, we need to center the pivot, because wherever the pivot is the origin from which it will scale up and down. So again, under Xform, you want to click Edit Pivot. Now, if you click Center, that's not exactly what I want. I want it to be in the front. So you can click Front. And actually, I found it's going to look even better if it scales from the front bottom. So you can just grab it and move it down and just say Accept. So I want to rotate this 180, and then we can go to motion design mode and create a line cloner. As always, I like to reset the location and rotation. It may take a few seconds to update, but it should be spawning a line of cubes like this. And so I will delete the default cube, and instead I need to select our, let's call it F2 heatsink, and we need to make it movable. So here under mobility, you need to switch it to movable in order for the cloner to accept it. And now I can just drag the heatsink on top of the cloner, let it update, and here you go. We have a line of heatsinks, but it's on the wrong axis. So under axis, I need to change it to X. And then you can keep lowering the spacing until you get a nice line of the heatsinks like this. So to see this better, I will go to Lights, Point Light, and make it that green color, and just move that point light above just like this. And cloner, we need more clones, so count 30. And now to reveal them, we simply need to scale them up and down using an effector. So I'll go to Effector, Create Linked Effector. For the shape, I just want it to be a plane, and sometimes it can be very hard to see sort of the edges of the effector. I'll just hide the studio so hopefully you can see it against the black background, right? So the plane is rotated the wrong way. So with the effector selected, I'll just rotate it 90 degrees and then lower the plane spacing, right? So here is our plane effector. It's just two flat planes, and the gap between them is controlled with the plane spacing. So if you set the scale now to 0 and move this plane effector left and right, you're revealing them, but we want to reveal them from the other way. So I'll hit E, and I have to rotate this 180 degrees actually. If I move this, I'm getting this nice reveal. So the plane spacing in this case controls the transition distance, basically. Like how long does it take for it to go from scale 0 to scale 100? So you can see what happens as I increase and decrease the plane spacing. So maybe let's do 10 to keep it kind of elegant like this. And I want to move it forward because I already want there to be heat sinks sort of on the right side of the shot. And I also want them to fly in from below. You can combine the transform operations. Right now we're just scaling it down, but you can also do offset on the z-axis. And you can see how this will move them up and down. So I just want to increase the Z offset and move them sort of out of the frame. As you can see, the effector already got added into my sequencer. If it's not here, just drag it in and set a keyframe for the transform on frame 0. And let's move it on the x-axis in our case. And then you want to go forward. Again, let's expand this to about 500 frames. Give ourselves about 150 frames to work with. And on frame 150, I want to move this forward on the x-axis. You can also move it here with the location and select both the keyframes and hit 4 to make them linear. Not bad, still a little fast for me, so I'll just expand these tracks a bit more to slow it down. Nice. So right now they're stopping very abruptly because the mode here for the effector is set to linear. It has linear easing. And I want them to slowly stop. So what you can do is play around with the easing types. Usually what I will do is in and out cubic, which you can see by the curve, how it will slow down and speed up. And so now when you watch this, it has this nice easing to it as it comes to a stop. If you wanted something a bit more extreme, you can do in and out exponential. And that's way more pronounced, right? So it's moving very fast until it reaches the end of the operation where it really slows down. That's a bit too harsh for me, so I'll just do in and out cubic. So let's create a camera to see what this will look like. So create camera, Cine Camera Actor, drag it into the sequencer. I want a strong depth of field. So what I'll do is set the focal length to 50. Set the aperture to 0, which will emphasize the depth of field effect. And then you need to move the camera back. Start playing with the manual focus distance. Start lowering it until you get it in focus. This is a bit too extreme, so I'll do 30 focal length. And let's do 2.5 for the aperture. Kind of just want this front area to be in focus. And I want to fill this gap on the right to make it look like it's continuing out of the frame. So what you can do is just grab the cloner actually and just move the cloner back on the x-axis, right, until it's filled up back here. So if I play this, hit G to hide the gizmos, it's starting to look decent. Now the green light is way too strong, so point light, let's lower the intensity, also move it higher. You know, if the depth of field is too strong, just keep increasing the aperture to maybe 3.5 and you can lessen the effect. And so I also want the camera to move from right to left as it's being revealed. So in frame 0, I want to make a keyframe for the transform for the camera, then go to the last frame and just move using the A key on my keyboard. I'm just moving to the left. As always, select the keyframes 4 to make them linear. And so now I have something like this, and I'll just move the effector track forward so that it fills the shot sooner, just like this. And so we could end it here, but it's a little boring. So we're gonna add one more effector to raise up these heat sinks one more time. So under cloner, effector, I'll create another linked effector, F2, and rename it as effector 2. I want to just offset it on the z-axis, and I'll have to probably scale it down a lot. So effector 2R, scale down. Now it'll be easier to understand what's going on if it's a box instead of a sphere. So I'll just change it to a box, and I want to hit R and scale it up on the z-axis so that it actually touches the pivot on the bottom of the grill. So raise it up on the z-axis. So this is fine, but the transition is way too gradual. So for the inner and outer extent, I want to make them both free. Shrink the outer extent and the inner extent on the x-axis. So 0 for the inner and about 90 for the outer. And so now what I'm getting is just this additional wave. It's a bit too high, so offset, I'll just lower. Nice. And so let's go back into our camera view. And the easiest way right now to animate this is just to link effector 2 to effector 1. So I'll just select effector 2 and drag it on top of the first effector, which will make it its parent. And now if I hit G to hide everything, I'm getting this. Now it's all a bit too fast, so I'll just expand the track for the camera to maybe 240. Same thing for the effector. Expand the camera track, reset, and here we go. Now the easing type is not there for Effector 2. So again, easing, let's do in, out, cubic. And finally, let's fix up the lighting a little bit. So I wanted to illuminate just behind the wave. That's what I did in the original trailer shot. Again, lower the intensity if you need to. And I'll hold Alt and make another copy of this point light, just move it forward. I kind of just want to get a nice kind of a rim edge light coming from the back. And let's make this one blue, but a very subtle blue, not too saturated. I like to just play with the location by dragging it around to see what kind of reflections I can get. Something like this, and keep lowering the intensity, maybe just 0.2. And finally, this light illuminating the front is a bit too strong, so that's gonna be one of our rectangular lights. So just lower the intensity for that. And this light is illuminating just the background at this point, so that one can be a bit bluish and less strong. And finally, let's go to our post-process volume. The bloom will probably not do much because there aren't any spots that are that bright. Maybe these highlights here are gonna get a little bit of bloom. I'd basically have to crank it up really high to see anything. So about 6 intensity, 0.5 threshold, and then search for contrast. Increase this to about 1.2, maybe 1.15. I'll just move the camera track and shorten this a bit. And here you go. So this will be our shot number 2. We covered new effector types, including plane and box. We also covered the line cloner type. We learned how to split meshes inside of the modeling mode. So final touch, we can go to our level 3, right click, asset actions, capture thumbnail, and then file, save all. And I'll see you in the next one.